Welcome back to lesson number 2 in God's master plan and our place in it. Hopefully you've downloaded the notes. If you haven't, you're in for a real surprise. This lesson number 2 really needs to be downloaded. You're going to have a lot of information in the notes that you don't have in the video. But starting off again with a cartoon, as I love to start off each lesson with, this lesson actually has 2 cartoons. And in the first cartoon on page 1, well, actually it's page 7 of the notes. But here we have, and by the way, this is Calvin and Hobbes is the cartoon strip. And we have Calvin, the little boy, talking to his fictional pet tiger. It's actually a stuffed animal. And Calvin says, the problem with people is they don't look at the big picture. Oh, sound familiar? Eventually, we're each going to die. Our species will go extinct. The sun will explode and the universe will collapse. Existence is not only temporary, it's pointless. We're all doomed, and what's worse, nothing matters. I see why people don't like to look at the big picture. Calvin says, well, it puts a bad day in perspective. And that is the topic of this lesson, is perspective. When we look at God's big picture, we have to use the proper perspective. Cartoon number 1 with Calvin lets us know he's looking at a physical perspective. But there's a problem with that. There's a different way to look at almost every situation. And therein lies cartoon number 2. In cartoon number 2, we have a little boy playing baseball, sandlot baseball, what we in America would call sandlot baseball. And a guy hits a long ball and it rolls into a body of water, maybe a creek, a lake, I don't know. So the little boy chases the ball. He gets to the body of water. He takes off his shoes. He takes off his shirt, climbs into the body of water with a stick, and he's poking around with a stick trying to find his baseball. And this little girl comes along and says, "You're not supposed to swim alone." And he looks at her and says, "I'm not. I'm playing baseball." So there's the activity of playing baseball and the perspective of understanding that just because he's in the water, he's not swimming. Everything in life, every activity, every trial, everything we encounter has at least 2 perspectives. It has a physical perspective, and it has a spiritual perspective. Now, when we look at the physical perspective, it kind of looks like that cartoon. It doesn't look like things are getting any better. And for those who believe that Christ came to make us better people and to make this world a better place to live in, then we need to examine real close the last 2,000 years. God is all powerful. We call him sovereign over everything, theological verbiage. He's boss. He has the power to do anything he wants to. But in 2,000 years, the morality of this world and the goodness of man doesn't seem to have improved one iota. If anything, in my opinion, it's gotten worse. Now, I realize that the Roman Empire was quite heavy-handed in the way they ruled over people. But bottom line here is, in 2,000 years, we haven't gained hardly anything in morality. There are probably more little skirmishes going on between tribes and countries and nations today than there was in the time of Christ. So from a physical perspective, things aren't getting too much better. That runs us into a problem. In Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, we are commanded, we're not asked to, not requested, not suggested, we are commanded just like one of the 10 commandments in the Old Testament, we are commanded to have a spiritual perspective. If you have been raised up with Christ, then set your mind on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on the things of this earth. There you go. Earth. Do not have a physical perspective. We have to consider everything. And in this lesson, lesson number 2, it presents God's perspective. When we put ourselves in God's throne room, the first thing we're going to see is Jesus Christ sitting at the right hand of God. But if we were to turn around and see what he sees, then we would see his entire creation. And his plan covers his entire creation. That's why we call it his master plan. He sees everything, and he has a plan for everything. All humanity, you, me, the whole world, the entire world, and even more. His entire creation is included in his master plan. But we are to view it from a spiritual perspective. Colossians 3, 1 and 2. Without that spiritual perspective, we can't get it figured out. As a matter of fact, here's a sidebar. I don't think this is in the notes. Here's the sidebar is that when we look at the physical world and what's going on around us, many people who preach prophecy and the end times and are we close to a rapture? Are we close to a trial and tribulation? Are we close to the return of Christ, which he promised, and he is coming again? But nobody can get it all figured out. And as a matter of fact, there's a lot of disagreement on what's going to happen even next in the timeline. So when we just look at a physical perspective, it's very confusing. But when we look at a spiritual perspective, everything clears up. And that's what we'll get into starting next lesson. So look forward to seeing you in lesson number 3. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Enjoyed having you here, and I look forward to seeing you in lesson number 3. I'm going to start rambling, I can tell. See you soon. Be blessed.